When we talk about the ancient peoples of Britain, we often reach for simple words: Celtic, native, original. But history, and especially genetics, rarely moves in straight lines. Instead of clear beginnings, it leaves behind layers. Some of those layers were overwritten quickly. Others remained visible for much longer, and when we look closely, those surviving layers are not spread evenly across Britain. They cluster toward the Atlantic edge, in Wales, in Cornwall, and across the sea in Brittany. To understand why these regions still hold on to the past, we have to go back to the very beginning, to the moment the story of Britain first began. The first settlers arrived in Britain around 10,000 years ago, shortly after the end of the last ice age. They were Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, and for several thousand years they were the island. But they did not remain the dominant population. Around 4000 BC, they were largely replaced by Neolithic farmers arriving from continental Europe, bringing agriculture and permanent settlements. However, the most dramatic change came later. During the Bronze Age, around 2500 BC, groups associated with the Bell Beaker phenomenon arrived. Named after their distinct bell-shaped pottery, these people were the westernmost wave of a massive migration from the Eurasian steppe, the vast grasslands of modern-day Ukraine and Russia. The impact was staggering. Genomic evidence shows that approximately 90% of Britain's gene pool was replaced in just a few centuries. This Bronze Age population is the true genetic baseline for almost everyone living in Britain today. Most later migrations, including the Anglo-Saxons, entered Britain from the east. As these populations moved westward, their demographic momentum weakened. Mountains, peninsulas, and distance acted as natural shields. They slowed the pace of change and allowed older layers of population, culture, and language to remain visible. In the ancient world, mountains and peninsulas acted as a physical shield for your identity. But in the digital age, those physical barriers have vanished, leaving our personal traces more exposed than ever. Right now, your personal data is exposed. Your name, address, phone number, even information about your relatives, is being collected and sold by companies you've never interacted with. And just like ancient traces, this digital footprint doesn't disappear on its own. It fuels identity theft, scam calls, and a trail that becomes harder to erase every year. To protect yourself, you need a modern shield. Incogni is a data removal service that tracks down data brokers and sends legally binding removal requests on your behalf. They remove information you never agreed to share. What sets Incogni apart is their custom removals feature. If you find your personal information on a specific website, a people's search database, a leaked archive, or an old forgotten forum, you simply send Incogni the link. A real privacy expert handles the entire process. No forms, no emails, no chasing unresponsive website owners, because they can't misuse what they can't find. Reclaim your digital identity. Use the link in the description, or visit incogni.com/historyhub. and use code HistoryHub for 60% off your annual plan. Now that your modern footprint is secure, let's go back to a time when no one was safe from replacement. Wales is the clearest example of a region that changed less rather than being rewritten. After the Bronze Age reset, later migrations struggled to gain a foothold. The evidence of continuity survived in plain sight. Look at the river names. These are not English or Latin. They are Brittonic names spoken continuously since Roman times and earlier. At places like Caerleon, the Romans built military fortresses, but they never established deep civilian cities. When Rome left, there was no dramatic collapse. because local life had never been fully replaced. Genetics tells the same story with striking numbers. While eastern England saw a massive influx of North Sea ancestry, in some areas reaching over 50%, Wales remained a stronghold of the older lineage. Studies show that over 80% of the ancestry in Wales still directly traces back to that ancient Bronze Age population. The father line, known as R1BL21, remains at its highest frequency here, found in nearly 3/4 of the male population. It stands undisturbed by the later migrations that reshaped the East. Wales was changed, but it was never rewritten. What makes this continuity visible is not only DNA, but language. Welsh is not a revived or symbolic tongue. It is a living descendant of the ancient Brittonic language spoken here long before Rome or England. Cornwall was not conquered overnight. It was gradually absorbed. Unlike the sudden shifts in the East, Cornwall experienced a slow, centuries-long transition. While it eventually became part of England, its ancient identity remains etched into the landscape and the bloodline. Genetically, Cornwall is a fascinating hybrid. While it shares deep roots with its neighbours, it remains distinct. Studies show that Cornwall retains roughly 70 to 75% of its pre-Anglo-Saxon ancestry, a significantly higher proportion than the lands just to its east. Cornwall once shared that same Brittonic language world. Cornish survived as a spoken language into the modern era, and even after its decline, its imprint remains embedded in place names, landscape, and identity. You can see this Brittonic layer in place names that still shape the map today: pen for hill or headland, tray for settlement, and land for church enclosure. Cornwall is also home to Fogus, mysterious, dry stone underground passages dating back to the Iron Age. These structures, alongside the continued ritual use of ancient stone circles, prove that this was a society that maintained its unique traditions for nearly 1,000 years longer than much of southern Britain. Cornwall is significantly older than eastern England, holding on to a layer of the past that was elsewhere overwritten. Brittany is the most surprising piece of the puzzle. It is not simply a French region with a Celtic past. It is a piece of Britain that moved across the water. After the collapse of Roman authority, Brittonic-speaking communities crossed the Channel into Armorica. They did not merely transmit ideas, they moved as people, and they moved in massive numbers. Studies of the Breton genome reveal that modern inhabitants of Western Brittany carry a significant amount of the same Atlantic genetic signature found in Wales and Cornwall. This stands in stark contrast to the rest of France, which was heavily reshaped by Frankish and Germanic migrations. The evidence is undeniable when you listen to the language. The Breton language is not a descendant of French or Latin. It is a P-Celtic language, directly related to Welsh and Cornish. A speaker of ancient Cornish and a speaker of ancient Breton would have understood each other far better than they would a neighbour from Paris or London. Because Brittany lay at the isolated Atlantic edge, it absorbed these British migrants while remaining insulated from the demographic shifts that rewrote the rest of the continent. As a result, Brittany preserves an Atlantic genetic and linguistic profile that, in some respects, retains features older than what survives inside Britain itself. It is not a frozen relic. It is a living continuation of an ancient maritime world. So who are the most ancient Britons if we define ancient as being replaced the least? By that measure, Wales stands at the top, the most continuous genetic and linguistic heartland in Britain, with the highest retention of Bronze Age ancestry. Cornwall follows, where older populations were partly absorbed, but never fully erased. The language faded, yet deeper genetic layers remained. Brittany holds a distinct position. It carries a strong Atlantic signature, but its population was reshaped through migration and continental mixing, making it ancient yet more hybrid and less genetically continuous than Wales. Eastern England, shaped most heavily by the North Sea world, shows the youngest genetic profile. These rankings, however, are only one way of reading a far more complex map of the British Isles. If this raises a bigger question, what really separates English, Scottish, Welsh, and Irish DNA, and how those differences took shape over time, I've explored that story in detail already. In that deep dive, we break down the distinct genetic signatures of each nation and the historical forces behind them. Because as we've seen today, ancient does not mean first, and it does not mean pure. It means still visible after everything else tried to erase it. In these regions, the memory of the first Britons still speaks through the rivers, the stones, and the DNA.